So since I was having so much fun making my flying geese, I decided to digitize an embroidery design to go inside of the geese. And whoops, this one's upside down. As I thought about it, I thought, how should I make it? Because if we're going to do a flying geese on our embroidery machine, then we're going to have a hard time coming down to the point here, to this point, and this point, and that point. You know, usually you get down into the points, not all the time, but a lot of times what they do is they'll quilt just inside the triangle and then quilt just inside of here. But I decided to make it all continuous with a curve so that even if you're off center a hair, you're still on. It still looks good. And I still have my crosshair digitized into the design as the first object. And I actually have a second object, which is the rectangle that's the exact size of the design, and this triangle. However, the triangle does not match this triangle. It's just in there to give you a reference point. And the reason why I went this route with this particular design is because this design is digitized for the Brother SE600, which only has a 4x4 hoop, or any other machine that would have a 4x4 hoop. And the sewing area of a 4x4 hoop is actually only 3.9 inches. Well, the most common flying geese units are finished at 4x2. So I was not able to digitize a rectangle that was exactly 4 inches if somebody, say, wanted a stitch in the ditch, but that would be too hard to line up anyways. But my point being, for the SE600 or any other 4x4 hoop, this rectangle just hugs the design. It doesn't hug the borders of the flying geese once it's sewn in and so on. However, I do have the same exact size design with a 4x2 rectangle and the exact dimensions of a triangle. And that would be for like someone who has a 5x7 or, something bigger than a 4-inch hoop, because you want to be able to center it. So you'll see at the sewing machine, I'm still using the crosshair to center it. I'm still hooping it the normal way I quilt in the hoops. And you'll see I stitched this one out. This was my first one. So I'm really just experimenting with this. And you can see it looks pretty straight. I think I may be, and it could just be my, my block could be off, but the point is right there. And let's see if I can get in closer. It's pretty darn right on, and that's because I lined it up with the crosshair. I did want to also mention that I have this also in a 6x3 finished flying geese. So that's because I have a Janome MB4, which has a bigger hoop. So anybody who has something that will take a 6x3 design can use that. Now, here's the other thing I did with the SE600 file. The SE600 puts a tie on and a tie off all the time. You can't turn it off. So, and I think they do that because they think since it's a beginner machine and so on, they don't want your stitches to fall out. Well, I digitize a tie in and a tie off when I make designs. So, and I only have three tie-ins and tie-offs, but you can see since the Brother SE600 puts in like 5 more, there's a little circle, you know, a solid circle there. It looks fine. It looks, you know, but I thought it was a little bit overkill because I bury the threads anyways, and I actually make the machine not trim. So I press the button for not trimming, and I'll show you that when I get to the machine. So I really tried to cover all bases so that we could do this in our hoop, and this would be cute as a pillow or a bag, you know, the front of a bag, or a tote, a clutch, a portfolio, anything really, a book cover, a laptop cover. You know, you just slap 2 pieces together and put a zipper in, and maybe a lining, because I don't like, in a purse, I don't want to have stitches in my lining. I feel it could get caught, so I would put an extra lining on. But you can see it's stitched out pretty good. It looks like I have a loop there. I don't know how that happened. I must have hit something, or who knows. This backing that I'm using was recycled. It had some dried glue on it, so it could have hit the dried glue. But let's see if I can focus. The back looks great. There's no railroad tracks, and that's the other thing. I was too lazy to change my bobbin tension for quilting in the hoop, because normally for regular sewing my bobbin tension is at 30 grams, and for quilting in the hoop I lower the bobbin tension to 23 grams. But I was too lazy, so instead of lowering the bobbin tension to 23, I just upped the top. Normally I was at, what was I at? I think I was at 4.5 for regular sewing, but I upped the top tension to 6.5. The batting, somebody sent me Hobbs Fusible by mistake, and I never used Fusible, but I might now, because what I'm seeing now is the Hobbs Heirloom is fusible on both sides, so you can fuse the backing and the top. This one, it seems like just the top, just one side was fusible. I think I threw away the packaging, but I just fused this quilt top, then just the top. I put a Teflon sheet over the whole thing and just put the iron here and here, and they say 5 to 7 seconds, and it's fused. And it washes away if you want it to wash away. So you could technically bind this or serge the edges or what have you and throw it in the wash to get rid of the fusible if you were making a bag or anything, the other things, and then it'll crinkle a little bit. Maybe if this embroidery is too dense, it may not crinkle that much, but I just think that quilted bags, purses, and everything is better these days because you can wash them with COVID and whatnot. So that's what I did. I took my block. First thing I did was I put the backing down with the pretty side facing down, put the Hobbs down and the glue side up, and then put the block on, and then put a Teflon sheet, just so I don't ruin my iron, because you know there's glue here. I put the Teflon sheet and then just ironed. And they say not to press. I think you just, not to sweep it back and forth. Just press it 5 to 7 seconds and it should be fused. So, and then I went to my method of hooping. I printed out the template and I folded it and taped it. And you can see I folded it. There's a dotted line here for that rectangle. And remember I said the design that's made for the SE600 has a rectangle that hugs the design exactly. And, oops, I keep turning it upside down. And then the triangle is just in there, you know. I guess if you wanted to see a little bit where your point would end up, you could trace using your trace button there. But the crosshair does the same thing. The crosshair ends where the design ends, up and down, side to side. So, anyways, so the way that I center this in this flying geese, I use the Get Squared ruler. I use this thing for everything. And I in my other videos, I've showed you how I have all 3 sizes. There's a 6-inch, 6.5, an 8.5, and I have the 12.5. And I use it a lot for centering because a square fits inside of every one of these. So for the 6.5, you divide it by 2 almost, you know. A 3.5 fits inside, and I used to draw my crosshairs in. I still do, and it locks in so it doesn't move. It's very easy. It just locks right in, and you can get your perfect placement. And you do that, every ruler has that. This one, 8.5, a 4.5-inch ruler locks in. So any 4.5. And then for the 12.5-inch, well, my 6.5 locks in. And I can draw my crosshairs with that. But at any rate, I start with this for this flying geese unit because, there's no crosshair here or anything. There's no way to tell where the center is. Yes, you've got the point there, but you don't really have anything on the sides. But you do have the boundaries of the rectangle. And since this is a 4x2 rectangle, well, the center of this small Get Squared is 3 and 3. And then I know it's 2 inches, so an inch above 3 and an inch below 3. I just put those 2 marks at the top and bottom of the rectangle, and then from side to side, the 3 again is the center, and it's 4 inches, so I go 2 away from 3 and 2 beyond, so that's 1 and 5. So 1 and 5, and here 2 and 4, 2 and 4, 1 and 5. And now this Get Squared ruler has everything lined up. So I make sure that it looks nice and straight. I've got a line here and here, kind of over here. And, your quilting is going to be off a little bit, the way you pieced it. But that looks pretty much squared. So, and if I put this in here, you could see, okay, well, that's probably where my crosshair is going to go, right where the 3 is. So then I use my template to that effect. There's a crosshair on here. So this crosshair lines up with the 3, and this crosshair lines up with the other 3. So I just place it on, trying to get, I'm looking here. I have this line here, because that is the center of this particular block. I just was lucky. So I have that lined up there, and this crosshair lined up with this 3. So I'll actually do this on the new hooping. So since I finished this corner, I'll do the opposite corner. So I'll do this unit. So I'm going to flip this around 180. So I'll put my get squared ruler down, and I've got my 3 lined up with this line, and I'm going to line up my 2 with this line on both sides, this side and this side. Move my 3 over. Okay. So I'm good there. I've got a line there and there. So I look pretty centered. 3, there's going to be my center there where the 3s are. So now I'll take my template, and I got to make sure I have it spun the right way, because I have a habit of putting it this way because it looks like a heart. So I think that's the right way, but the way I have it, no. So I have it the correct way. My crosshairs are going to get lined up with the centers here. So I'll just start with this one. I'll put it there. And I have double-sided tape on the back of this, just one piece. So I'll start here with this crosshair and this 3. And then I'll go over there. It's interesting because I didn't plan this, but this design is 3.5 inches wide. Well, so is the inside of this get squared ruler. So this design just locks in going left to right. So I don't even really have to worry about lining up this one with the 3. It just automatically went in. I didn't plan that. So anyway, so there it is. It's in there perfectly. And you can even see the triangle, like you may not be able to see it as well over here because of the fabric, but you can see the little line on my fabric. The triangle is right here, and it coincides with this line of the template. And I can also see the tip of my triangle unit up here, and it coincides with this vertical cross here, so I know it's centered there. So I'll press down there. I'm done with the get squared ruler. I'll grab my hoop template that I created so that it goes inside the ring. It goes all the way inside and flush to the fabric. And I might have these for sale on my website for the SE600. This one is for the Brother hoop, and I have one for my generic hoop as well. It's slightly different. I think my generic one I made better. I have this side folded up as well, so it locks in better. So anyways, so I take this crosshair and line it up with this crosshair on my template. Okay, and I have double-sided tape. I'm going to hold it in the center. I have double-sided tape here and there. Now I have holes in the template where I used to just put tape over the holes. I could still do that, but I wasn't thinking. So I have it there and there, just some skinny double-sided tape. I don't want the tape to ever be where the design template is. I want it to be off to the side or above, because you know we'll be taking this off after we hoop. So that's down securely. My inner ring should lock in. Not as good with this template, like I said, because but it's not bad. It locks in pretty good. I have double-sided tape on the bottom corners of the hoop. So I'll press the corners down. Not sure how good it's holding, but we're going to center this at the machine. Take my bottom ring, slide it under, and I can kind of feel with my fingers there's a huge gap there. But you can go like this and press if you feel a gap. And I think I'm okay. So I'll just press this left bottom corner and then the top left corner. So I'll hold those two. And I'll kind of go like that and kind of push in a little, push my hoop a little, and I'm going to push this corner down and move my thumb over now. And I'm kind of pressing the side and this corner and this side at the same time. I think that seems to help better. And I forgot to show you the hoop. I have the hoop dialed open really wide. Well, you can see it here. I have that set like almost as wide as it can be. It's a good 1/2 inch, 5/8 of an inch. And that's because I don't want it real tight, because I don't want to make a hoop burn, although they do come out with water, you know, steam or whatever. I just didn't want that. So press down. These hoops don't recess because I think they think you're a beginner. And I'll check the back. The back looks good. And I'm going to grab my finger in these two holes and pinch them together because we're done with this. And then lift up, kind of slide my hand in there and press on the fabric so I can release that tape. So that's still down good, and now we'll go to the machine. Okay, so here we are at the machine, and I'm going to pull up my design on my USB. It's in this folder that I created. I have to go to the next page. It's not any of these folders. It's in this folder, Fly Geese. There's the design, set, and there it is. Now, of course, it shows centered on the screen, but it doesn't look centered in my hoop. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to center the design, and we're going to check for rotation. So now the design does look like it's centered on the screen because of course it always comes in that way, but we have to actually center it with the needle. So in order to do that, we want to actually hear the carriage move. So this is not the screen that we want to be moving things on. So the screen, the first screen that pops up that says edit end, that's what we want to do, edit end. This second screen, the one that says embroidery in the corner, is the one that'll allow us to move the carriage so that we can actually hear the carriage move. So we're going to look at the needle, and I'm going to use these arrows, and these numbers up here will change. So I'm going to move it to the right. So the way we want to think of this is we're looking at the needle, and we want to get the needle to be in the center of my crosshair. So I'm going to move these buttons here. And you can see it moved 0.5 millimeters to the right. That's positive to the right. So even though the carriage moved, it looks as though the needle moved. So we'll do it again. Not yet. More. More. If I dial down, I gotta go a little bit more. And I'm right on my vertical, so if I dial down, my needle is right on the vertical. Now, does it have to go up or down? Maybe it can go up a hair. So I have to dial the needle back up again. And I'll just take the up arrow once. So you see it moved 0.5 up. That's a positive direction. And I'll dial it down. And it looks like I'm right on my crosshair if I dial the needle down. So as far as centering goes, I mean, I could move it up maybe another 0.5 mil. See if that was too far. No, that put me right on. Okay. Whoops. So, and it'll warn you if your needle is down, which is nice. So these are my movements, 1.0 and 3.5. That's how much I had to move it. Now 3 mils is about 1/8 of an inch. So just think of that. You know, I only really have a 1/4 inch on each side to mess with. And look at how far it looked like I moved this. So anyways, so we're centered. Now we have to check for rotation, and the way to do that is you follow your crosshair. So we want to go into embroidery now. We don't rotate on this screen yet because we don't know if we need to rotate. We have to follow our crosshair to see if we need to rotate. So I'll hit embroidery. Our very first design, or our very first object, is the crosshair. I've been trying to make them green now, and you can see it here in green. And we're going to fast forward through that crosshair to see if we need to rotate. So I'm going to be hitting this plus minus button here. And we're going to plus minus the stitches, not the thread colors. So there's my needle over there. I'm going to be hitting this plus 10 stitches forward, or 10 stitches back, or what have you, or plus 1, just to follow the crosshair, just so you know what I'm going to be hitting. I'll hit plus 1. So plus 1 takes me to the top of the vertical crosshair. I've decided to make my crosshairs so that the vertical one stitches first and it starts up at the top. So over here on this screen, when you're at 0, okay, let me go back to 0. When you're in the center, you want to hit plus 1, and that'll take me to the top of the crosshair. So now that I'm at the top of the crosshair, I want to kind of dial my needle down and see if I'm on it. Let me go plus 1 to bring it down a hair. It's doing its tie on. Okay. Now, as I'm dialing down, I don't know if you can see that, but it almost looks like the needle is to the right of my crosshair. Now, is my template pivoted? It almost looks like it, no, it looks like it's straight. I mean, I can see this diagonal of the triangle is hitting the other one, kind of. Let me spin it a hair. Okay, now that one's hitting there. On this side, though, it's not. So is my stitching off? I don't know. But as I pivoted it to meet this one, the needle looks more in line with my vertical crosshair, but this line, this triangle, is not hitting this fabric triangle. So I'm going to split the difference of the two. Oh no, they're both in the same spot. They are both in the same spot. And how are we at the top? I must have spun it. I'm checking the top to see if the point of my fabric triangle is still at the point of my template, and it is. So let me dial down now. So I'm to the right. So if my needle were a spinner, like a spinner on a, let me get a shorter one. If my needle were a spinner, you know, like on a game, a board game, this is better. So right now, if my needle were a spinner, my needle is to the right. So instead of the spinner being straight up and down, it's like this. So this top part is to the right of center. So if this is center, my spinner is to the right of center up at the top. Spinner / needle is to the right of center. Which means when I fast forward down to the bottom of that vertical crosshair, you can see my needle's probably going to be to the left of this center line. So let's just move this over a little. Let me push my needle back up. I was able to just dial it backwards because I didn't penetrate and engage the hook at all. So you can dial backwards with the hand wheel as long as you don't engage the hook. So anyway, so I'm going to hit +10 now to get to the bottom. And I'll dial down. And sure enough, I'm slightly to the left of, I wish I could get closer. I'm slightly to the left of that vertical center. There, I'm a little closer. Just like I thought. So that would mean that in order to get my spinner, hence needle, vertical, I need to rotate my needle counterclockwise, like this. And I probably only have to rotate it 1 degree, and 1 degree might be too much, so I might just end up leaving this. But we're going to try it. So 1 degree counterclockwise. So we come over here. So we're still on this fast forward screen. We have to get out of it to rotate. We got to go back to that other screen. Got to click OK. And now to get back, the only thing we can do is use our back button. Needle is down. I'm not going to press needle up down because I don't want to penetrate anything. I'm just going to hit OK. And I'll dial the needle. If I dial it down, it's going to go down. I didn't dial it up enough backwards, so I dialed it backwards away from me. So let's see if I can use the back button. Okay. I'm at this screen, the one where I moved everything, and it has the word rotate. We'll click that. We're going to go counterclockwise 1 degree, and so you'll see the 1 degree clockwise and 1 degree counterclockwise. And this will change from a 0 degrees. We're going counterclockwise, so it's not going to change to 1 degree. You have to think of positional geometry, basically. If this spinner we're at this position, looking at this point, this position is 0 degrees, or if we spun it around 360, this spinner position is now at 360 degrees. So 0 and 360 are the same position. So when we go clockwise in the rotation, we went 1 degree clockwise. If we go counterclockwise, we went 1 degree backwards. So we went from 360 to 359. So this is going to say 359 when we hit 1 degree counterclockwise. So let me hit the 1 degree counter and you'll see this change to 359 and the design rotated. We don't know if it worked. Maybe we should have been able to go 1/2 degree only. They only let you go 1 degree. So let's just see. It was probably fine, but just for the sake of the video. So we went our 1 degree. We have to click OK and trace the crosshair again to see if that 1 degree was perfect or overboard or whatever. So hit OK. We have to go back into embroidery, back into fast forward stitches, and let's go ahead and we'll click our, because we're at 0, we're on the 0 stitch, but we're still on, where everything is 0 at the top. When we hit +1, then we go to the first stitch, the first object, and that's just, how long that's going to stitch for. I think they just round it. But at any rate, we're at the top. So let me do +1. I'm just hitting the +1 stitch to get away from the tie off. And let me dial down. And I'm on a little bit better unless the paper moved. So that 1 degree was probably fine. Let me do +10 stitches. And I'm right on there. So I'm good rotationally. If I really want to be OCD, I could keep fast forwarding to check my horizontal placement. But when you rotate things, you really only need one line to check. Either you check the horizontal or the vertical. It's easier to check the vertical because you're standing right in front of it. But just for the sake of the video, we'll check the horizontal. So I'll just hit +10. Make sure your fabric's not in the way. Let me hit +1 to get on. And I dial down. And I'm up a little high, but that just could mean I didn't center myself good. But it's not bad. But let me see if I'm up at the same amount over here. So I'll dial back up. +10, +10. Whoops, -10. +1. Dial down. And actually I'm right on there. So I could possibly rotate another degree counterclockwise. But it's just going to take me above this line and then put me on this one. These two aren't agreeing. I'll go back to 0 and then +1. +1. I'm back. It's still at the right of there. I guess I could. I'm slightly to the left. I'll just do it 1 more degree and see. You don't have to be this OCD, but it is a flying geese, so I'm just going to leave the camera like that. I'll hit OK, and I'll do back, rotate, 1 more degree. This will say 358. Say OK, embroidery, plus or minus stitches. We'll go +1 again. And let's go over there now. And see where we're at. +1, +1, +1. I'm right on. +10. I'm right on. +10. So see, I guess it's good. I'm right on there, but this other one, let's see. I mean, I'm in 3 minus 1. I'm up a little high there, but I think we're fine. I mean, in these other places, I was okay. So, I mean, that's really splitting hairs. So I'm good. We hit okay. And we don't want to hit okay because we want to fast forward to the last thread color, which is the blue design. So here's our fast forward threads. So plus took us to the second object, which is this triangle and the rectangle. I just put that in there in case somebody wants to follow that or trace it to see their boundaries, but you know, you don't have to. So, and I'll fast forward again to the next object. Now we're on object 3, but this machine, see my other machine, my Janome MB4, when you fast forward to the next object, my Janome machine automatically takes you there to the first stitch of that object that you just went to. But this machine is not doing that. But if I hit +1, now it's taking me to the first stitch of that object, the blue object, the third object. And you can see my crosshair, their little tiny little marker is on the first stitch. So now we're ready to pull up our bobbin thread so we can take this off. And I have my thread, my top thread, through this presser foot bar and, you know, through it and then pulled it so that it's fed through to the bottom. I just think it's better. So I'm going to put my presser foot down, hold my finger on the hoop here with the thread, and I'll do needle up, needle down. Let me see if I can get closer. Okay. Needle up, needle down. And then I have to lift my presser foot to pull up on this top thread, and I pulled up the bobbin thread there. I see the loop. Grab it with these tweezers, and if you just kind of pull it, the end will come out, because sometimes it's hard to know which end to pull. You're just pulling out bobbin thread. So now I have them both. Put the needle down, and I don't recall if I mentioned this or not, but I took all the tie-ons and tie-offs off of this design because I know that this machine, this SE600, makes its own tie-ons and tie-offs. So I didn't want double tie-ons because these were thick on my original design. They were a little heavy. They look fine. They just look like little eyes. They're kind of cute. But there they are there and there. But I want to try it with just letting the machine do its tie-on, because I'm burying the long threads anyways. you know, if this is going to be a quilt or a pillow, or, well, not a pillow, it would be hidden on the back. But I'm going to just hold my finger here on the hoop and let it do its tie on. So I'll hit start. Oh, that's right. It comes around this way. So it goes in a clockwise direction. It makes a little curl. So I have to take this now before it, did I catch it before it got to it? Yeah, I think I did. Take this thread and bring it around to the back and just lay it down, and it should be fine. It won't hit it at all. And I also want to make sure, I forgot to mention on the screen, there's no jump to center or jump to 4 inches away at the end of the design. Normally I digitize my designs to have a long 4-inch jump so that you can bury that long tail thread and you know, make a knot and bury it and then cut it. But with these Brother machines now, you can program them to trim or not to trim. And if I hit OK just to get out of this screen, I'm still in embroidery. You can see by default the trimming was pressed. Well, I don't want it to trim because I want it to just, I want to cut my own long 4-inch thread. And the reason I didn't program that long jump in is because this machine makes a tie off. So it made a tie off after my long jump. And I was like, well, that's a pain because now I have to, you know, take that knot out. So, and whereas my Genomium before, I can tell it, no, don't make any tie-ons, don't, you know, don't make any extra tie-ons or tie-offs. So, anyways, to make a long story short, you want to make sure that this is not checked. Now, granted, if you have a machine that has a 5x7 hoop and you're making my other design does have that long jump. But at any rate, for right now, we don't want it to trim because there's no jump. So it's not trimming. So there's a lot of options, but if you have an SE600, this is the way I made it. I guess I could make it both ways. I will. I'll put the other one in. I just don't want to confuse people. So anyways, so let's keep stitching. So now it's telling me it's done embroidering, and it didn't cut anything. It did do its tie off, so I'm going to do a needle up. I'm not going to cut anything, but I'm going to do a needle up. And you can see there's the tie off that it made, and they are a lot smaller now, which is nice. So I'm going to lift this up, and now when I pull, you know, I can get a lot of thread here. I'm just working on the top thread now. And I'll give myself like 4 inches to bury just to make it enjoyable, and I left 4 inches. But when I take off the hoop, I have to remember I have to cut my bobbin thread too. So I'll just unhook it. And if you come to the end, you know, from here to here is about 4 inches, then I can just go ahead and cut my bobbin thread. I can see it right there. You get this out of the way. There's the top one I cut. But you can see my bobbin thread right there. And you can just, you know, cut it. Leave a little bit hanging out if you want, because we're going to pull it up. So there you have it. And it just came out beautifully. So, oh, this is still big. I wonder if I caught a thread, because that's not supposed to be that big. Let's see. I have to take that to the table and look at that. It looks like I caught some of the thread in there. So if it's coming around, I was holding my thread here, you know, and that was the way it was traveling. It traveled right over itself. So in the future, for these other 2 that I do, when I start, I'll hold the thread over here. Well, let's see. Where would I hold it? Yeah, I would hold it at this corner, because then it won't go over itself. But I can maybe fish those out unless it's split the thread. If it's split the thread, then that's hard. But I'll still try. Because, you know, how am I going to bury it now with the fact that I ran over it? It still looks really nice. Look at this point is right at the V. It's just perfect. In the back. So you just want to make sure you don't have any railroad tracks. So it's finished, and I have to say okay, and I have to just back out of this whole thing. I mean, I thought about just resetting everything if I back out, and let me take my hoop out. If I go, you know, if I hit center, these will go to 0. So you could see the screen, it brought it back to the center. And if I hit rotate, I can just do, you know, +1 clockwise, and then again, took me back to 0. So you're back to resetting, or I could have just hit reset. If I was here at 358, I could hit reset, and now everything is back. I don't do that only because I'm not allowed to do that on my Janome MB4, and I get so goofed up between the 2 machines. But you can. You can hit reset, okay. You could hit center here for your centering. You went back to 0, 0, and then re-hoop for your next hooping, you know. I mean, I'll try it this time with this machine and try to remember when I go back to my other one. So there it is. So there's the back. And so you just got your 2 little dots. And that's fine. It's cute. Stitches look great. And there's the front. So it's, you know, it's so forgiving because you just got a curve here. So the only thing we really made sure we lined up was this point and this point, because that's where the crosshair was. And, you know, we saw this line and this line. Even though our triangle was smaller, it still had the same 90-degree angle, so the line seemed to work because, you know, everything was centered. So, you know, our spacing is good here and here. And up at the top, it's a little off up at the top. It looks like it. Yeah, it looks like it's farther away here. Now let's see, I rotated it. If you recall, I rotated it counterclockwise 2 degrees. That would lower this. So I don't know. You know, our stitching is always, piecing could be off, who knows. But, so that's that. And then these hoop marks, I've re-ironed this a couple times already. And you don't have to, though. You can just, you know, hoop the next one. But if you don't want that hoop ring there, you can just iron this again. How many times can I iron it? You know, I don't want the glue coming through, even though the glue washes off, they say. But I'm glad I took off the tie-ons, because that's plenty of tie on there. You don't need 20,000 stitches for a tie on or a tie off. And I think the bigger machines allow you to turn off tie-ons and tie-offs. Like the 5x7 Brother, I think, allows you, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure. If it doesn't, then you'd have to use this design. I just don't want to make too many renditions of the same file because people are going to get confused. And anybody can write me if they need the tie-on or they don't need it or they want the jump or whatever. The other file has the jump and it has the tie-ons. So it's completely different than this one. So I don't know. Maybe I should just put this one out there and then nobody will get confused. Or will they? I don't know. I should probably talk to a few people who have the design. I just wanted to mention something. I went back and I re-ironed this for my next hooping. And I did notice that on this last one I did, I'm showing a little bit of bobbin thread. Like if you go with your fingernail and you can hear it snapping, you can feel the bobbin thread. So I'm pulling up bobbin thread. So I had it at 5.5 on the top. I just lowered it to 5. I just don't want it to be too loose. But when I first started the design over here, the first one I did, I had it at 4.5. And there was no bobbin threads coming up, and then I forgot to tighten it and I went up to 5.5. Maybe that was too much. So on this next one, I'm going to do it at 5 on top. It's so weird because I have the opposite problem on my multi-needle. I can't get my top tight enough unless I jump through hoops and do all kind of things. I mean, I got it to work, but it was hard. Whereas these single needles, it seems easier to get the top tension tight. So we'll try that. And it could be because the batting is, you know, a little denser. It's fused on. I don't know. There's so many variables. So we'll see. So I'll go ahead and hoop this next one here in the same manner. 3. And so I got this 3 here in the center. And this 4 up here with the top of the block. The 2 at the bottom of the block. Grab my template. Line up my crosshairs. Press it down. Put this on. Line up the crosshairs. I just have 2 pieces of tape there. This on, hook it in, press it down. I did it again. Oh my God, how funny. I do this all the time. Does anybody know what I did? This is upside down because it's a heart. Oh my God. Oh, I could have left. Well, now I have to start over. I don't know how many times I've done that. Okay, so here on my last one, I finally figured out where to hold the thread. So the left corner up here was incorrect. It's actually, you have to hold it straight behind where it starts and then let it take a few stitches to bend around. See if I can focus in. Let it take a few stitches to about there. Then you have to stop it. You have to stop it and then bring it down so that it can finish stitching around. And as it passes the top, then you have to stop it again and bring this up. So that's 2 times you have to stop it, unless I'm thinking of this wrong. Yeah. So, and it made a really nice tie on this time. It's very nice. I know it's hard to tell because the fabric is dark there. But it's perfect again. Looks great. So all 4 of them are done. And now I have to decide what I'm going to put in this center square. And then I thought about, for the border, I could do it freehand, or I could do straight lines, or I could digitize a big design. Let me see, this is 10 inches. See, on my Janome MB4, I can only go 8 inches wide. So, I don't know. I could do serpentines on the Brother. They're real pretty, and I could just serpentine all the way. You know, I could serpentine right off the fabric. Here's the back of it. It's so cute. And there's the front. Oops, it's fraying. Very cute. You can't see the inside. Too bad. Here you can see it a little bit. Not in that one though. That one a little. Oh, that's cute. It looks like a little cow. Anyways. So, I'm kind of excited about this. I went ahead and digitized a little feather wreath. I've always wanted to make my own. They're not easy to make. And, you know, I'm sure you could buy this design, but you can never get it this small. This is only 1.75 inches. It's a, double wreath. And I guess my tip here is when it starts its tie-on and starts to stitch, it starts to go into the outer feather, I would stop the machine and tape those threads because they almost got caught up in the stitching again. So I would tape them, and this is going to go around and do the outer, and then it's going to do the inner, and then it's going to do an outline. So it's a little thready around the outline, but that's kind of cool. That's almost like thread painting. I marked these crosshairs with chalk, just short little lines. But then I realized I didn't even need it because I have this, and I could just line up the diagonals of the ray with the corners, and then these sides, the crosshair part of the ray will just be there for me to follow. And I digitized a crosshair in this design as usual. So I just basically put this on, lined up my corners, and I have the center there. I think I did put a little chalk in there, and I just taped it down, and that's what I followed, and I moved the design and rotated it according to this stencil, because you're just stitching out a circle, so that's really all you need is a crosshair. And I checked the outer boundaries too, to make sure that it was, a quarter inch away or whatever from the stitching line. This one looks a little closer than down here, but it's okay. It's good from side to side. And I have to bury my threads. But there it is on the back. It's just so cute. So that was fun. That was really fun. When I do the border, you have to remember that you're going to have either binding around here or, a seam. So really, you want to keep your design a ½ inch away from the raw edge, at least a ½ inch away. So you're not centering your border. I make that mistake sometimes. So, there you go. Okay, so all the quilting is done. And what I decided to do, as you can see, can't really see the dark because of the lighting. That's a little better. I decided to just use the serpentine stitch on the Brother SE600 and just sew this, as a sewing machine method instead of trying to embroider these strips. So, and what's nice is, and actually I used this air soluble or water soluble purple pen, and I don't want to put water on it because then this Kona solid fabric always gets funny water stains when you wet it and let it dry normally. So I'll just let that disappear. It'll disappear in a couple hours. Most of it's already disappeared, but there's some blotches. But at any rate, I tried to stay a ½ inch away from the edge just because I'll be binding this or stitching it as something. I'm not sure. And so I drew the lines. I drew the lines a ½ inch away, but then I had to space them out more. So once I got to the machine, so they're more like 3/4 of an inch away if you were to follow the center line for the serpentines. And this serpentine, then I probably technically drew my straight line 3/4 of an inch from the edge. Let's see, is that what I didn't do it that way, but I should have, and so I had to make do with it. So the center of this serpentine, yeah, it's 3/4 from the raw edge, and then the center of the next one would be 3/4 from that one. So the magic number is 3/4. And I wasn't sure how I was going to deal with the corners, but I just decided to go right off the edge on both ends. And it turns out that made a nice design in the corner. So it's going to look like, it'll look nice. It'll look like a corner. So I'm really happy with the way this turned out. It's just beautiful. Just beautiful. And I just let it trim the ends because this is going to be bound. So it doesn't matter about burying those threads or anything. So that entire block was quilted with the SE600. And I used a number 12 sharp needle, just so you know. And my tension ended up being just 5. And my bobbin tension was 30 grams. Now 5 on my SE600, let me see what that comes out to be in grams. A number 5, it's about 90 grams. Yeah, in my notes I have here my chart that I keep changing. Sewing with batting, I use 90, and this is for the SE600, these 2 rows. I use 30 in the bobbin, 30 grams in the bobbin, and that's for regular sewing as well. But sewing with batting, I use 90 on the top, and 90 on the top is a 5.0 on the dial. So 90 grams on top, so that's a 1 to 3. But when I was sewing cotton, I only had to go to 80 grams on top, which was about 4.5. Still 30 in the bob. And now, quilting in the hoop and regular embroidery, if I really wanted to be correct, I would loosen the bobbin a little to 230 and also loosen up the tension a little. But I didn't. I was too lazy, and so I wrote in pencil here, if I don't want to change the bobbin tension, down to 23, I say 230 because I like working in the NMs. Forget what that's called. But at any rate, if I don't want to go down to 23 in the bobbin and just keep it at 30, then I can just put the dial on 5, the top on 5, meaning it'll be 90 on top, just like this. And it did work fine. The single needles are easy with tension. And for regular embroidery, I haven't tested that, but most people, well, they do now make a lot of these machines with 2 different bobbin cases, and that's why, you don't need to have a bomb-proof embroidery, so your tension doesn't need to be that high. And, everything can be lowered. The entire thing was done on the SE600. It's just beautiful, and the serpentine stitch is just gorgeous on that machine. That's what made me fall in love with it, because the stitch length is nice and big. I just love it. It's perfect. So, I don't know if I'm going to wash it, because it'll crinkle up, but that's fine. And it might change the size of it as well. So, I might distort the square. But before I did the sides, I forgot to mention, not the sides, before I did the serpentines, I basted along the whole edge of the block. Even though it's fused, it's not fused that great. And when I basted around the edge, I used this blanket stitch foot. It's a 5mm wide foot, so you have to be careful because it's a 7mm wide machine. If you leave this on and then do this 7mm serpentine stitch, your needle will bang into the edge. But at any rate, this is nice to do on the edge, a foot like this, because you can move the needle so that it's hitting 1/8 of an inch in from the edge, and you can line your fabric up, the edge of your fabric, with the inside of this foot. And what's nice about having this foot on the edge is that it doesn't press down on the edge, and so it doesn't push the fabric and make a hill in front of it as it's going. It just, everything is nice and smooth and is not pushed forward or anything, Because remember, you can't adjust the pressure, foot pressure on this machine, but this is a good way to do it. Some people will use a zipper foot too, but I just like this better because you could see what you're doing too. And you do have pressure here, and that's where you want it, on this side. And I think I moved my needle to stitch width of 3.0, I think. Well, and it was on the basting stitch, so that was it's on page 1, and it's stitch number 7, so there's 6. We'll go, so it's 1-7 is the stitch. And I changed the width to 3.0 because that makes it about 1/8 of an inch in from the edge with using this foot. So if I dial the needle down, you could see it's coming right on the stitches. And then you just ride right along that edge. So I did that first, and then I did the serpentine stitch. And I let the serpentine stitch knot right on within that 1/8 of an inch there. I let it make a knot. It's not going to hurt anything because that's going to be covered up. So that's it. So I hope this was helpful. And now to edit it. It's going to be fun. So everybody could see it real soon. Thanks a lot.